Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining session number 8. It is about recent estimations of the impact of the final EU-Mercosur Association Agreement. My name is Marinos Tsigas, and I am an international economist at the US International Trade Commission. Erwin Koron from the Center for Global Trade Analysis is hosting and recording this session, and he will help us manage our time today. I want to thank Gabriela Valverde for organizing this session and including us all. We have 3 presenters today and 1 discussant. Before we start, I want to remind us about the session protocol and etiquette. Please, all attendees, except the person currently speaking, remain muted. Presentations last 20 minutes. Erwin will prompt the presenter when there are 2 minutes left. When 20 minutes have elapsed, Erwin again will host the presenter and I will move to the discussion period. Discussion periods last 10 minutes and immediately follow each presentation. Listeners should enter their question or comment to everyone in the chat box. I will accept questions in the order received. I will read the listener's name and question, and then I will allow the presenter to respond verbally. Presenters, please again restate the question before answering. We will do this until the host prompts again that 2 minutes remain. Following each presentation, there is going to be a 2-minute transition period to allow the next presenter load and share their presentation. At the end, the discussant will discuss the session and has 30 minutes. Okay, so I will introduce now our first speaker, Antonia Navozavi from the Complutense University of Madrid. It's present the new EU-Mercosur Association Agreement, a quantitative assessment of its impacts on global trade in agricultural commodity. Antonia, the floor is yours. Please share your slides.
All right, greetings everyone, and thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor.
Antonia, we don't hear you very well.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So greetings everyone. My name is Antonia Ngabzafi. I am a PhD candidate within at the university, the Complutense University of Madrid. And today I would like to present one of our papers entitled New EU-Mercosur Association Agreement, Quantitative Assessment of its Impact on Global Trade in Agricultural Commodities. So as you already know, on the 28th of June 2019, the European Union and Mercosur countries announced the conclusion of the association agreement between the 2 regions after 20 years of negotiation. In this paper, we're going to assess its impact on the global trade. And my talk today will be organized as following. First, I will set the background. Then I will discuss what has been done in the literature on this topic. Then I will present our model and assessment strategy. Then I will conclude. The initiation of the trade agreement cooperation between the EU and Mercosur is as old as the Mercosur itself, and it can be tracked back in 1995 when the EU-Mercosur Framework Cooperation Agreement was signed. In the meantime, there were different rounds, several rounds of negotiation, some failed and others successful, that end up to the current agreement that we have. So basically, this trade agreement will be the second biggest trade bloc ever created. In fact, the EU-Mercosur region accounts for 20% of the world GDP and opens a market of 8% of the world population. That is approximately 600 million of people, with GDP per capita ranging between 9,000 US dollar and 35,000 US dollars. So this market is a very big one. Will be the second biggest trade bloc ever created after the RCEP region. Just for information, the RCEP region accounts for 30% of the world GDP in 2019. Here, I would like to show you the market structure of Mercosur. So in 2019, the EU countries mostly trade among themselves with the United States and China, and comparatively, intra-Mercosur commercial exchange is lower. However, exchange among the two blocs, meaning the EU and Mercosur, are significant and also bear immense potential. For example, in 2019, the EU imported 42.9 billion worth of goods from its South African partners. But interestingly, most of EU's imports is quite balanced. As you can see here in the figure, the EU imports this this value of manufacturing goods and this value of agricultural goods from Mercosur countries. In the opposite, Mercosur imports more of manufacturing products than agricultural products from the EU. So here I set up, as you can see here, the EU mostly imports gas and coal from Mercosur in 2019, followed by products such as vegetable oils and fats, or other products such as cereals, meat products, and beverage and tobacco. On the other side, Mercosur imports mostly machinery from the EU, followed by pharmaceutical products, plastic products, and here we can also have motor vehicles and parts. And this asymmetric trade relationship between the two blocs has significant influence on the outcome of the negotiation of the EU-Mercosur agreement, as it demonstrates each partner's strategic interest, and also in light of the trade barriers that prevail in each sector. In this slide, I show you how the trade barriers evolve. So here we can see that for the EU, tariffs are already generally low, except on products such as bovine meat, on dairy products, products such as sugar, and live animals, where tariffs peak. Regarding Mercosur countries, we can see that tariffs are in average higher in manufacturing sectors, compared to agricultural sectors. And here, strikingly, the tariff applied by Mercosur are quite high on products such as on agricultural products such as sugar or dairy products and beverage and tobacco. So, given this market structure, each country have proposed their own offers for their own interest. And here, what you see here is the tariff liberalization schedule of Mercosur countries, which, if I share, let me share a more dynamic version of this chart. I'm sorry, cannot recall the okay. Can you can you see the tariff reduction schedule of Brazil under the EU-Mercosur Agreement?
Yes, yes, we can see that.
Okay, perfect. So here you can see that with this with this paper, we mainly focus on the trade component of the agreement, as you know, obviously. And what will happen is that by the end of the implementation, the EU-Mercosur Agreement will significantly liberalize trade in goods. And here you can see that on Mercosur side, in the case of Brazil, assuming an entry into force of the agreement in 2020, tariffs will drop tariffs will the share of tariff lines with, at 0% with the AVE of 0% will go from 8% to 12% at the entry into force. Then in the 5 years later, it will go to 33%. 10 years later, it will go to 82%. And at the end of the implementation period, less than 10% of tariff lines will not be liberalized. That is for the case for Brazil. If we have a look at the EU side, for the EU, currently already more than 20% of tariff lines are already at zero. And at the entry into force of the agreement, the number of tariff lines that will be fully liberalized will increase to 48%. Then already in 2032, we will have less than 5% of tariff lines that are not liberalized. So this will be the liberalization commitment of each partner. So based on that, in the literature, there are studies, the main studies on the the potential impact of the new EU-Mercosur Association Agreement, or the one of Carmen Estrades in 2012, a comprehensive study by the LSA Consulting in 2020, and Khalil and Rivera in 2020. So all of these three studies, they have in common that they contain errors which make productions of the tariff cuts. They neglect or miss the quantification of NTMs, and they did not include the treatment of tariff rate quotas, which is a key component of the treaty. For that, our contribution is that first we use staged preferential tariffs computed based on the text of the agreement. We incorporate NTMs into the model through their AVA estimates, which are the tariff equivalent expressed in the form of percentage, and we include tariff rate quota into the model also through AVE estimates. So I will mainly focus on the first and third solutions that we have brought in this analysis. So in our developing our model assessment strategies, we as I said, we used forward-looking values of preferential tariff. So in a tariff offer, basically you have three main elements: the product code, the base duties, so that's or the base rate, and the staging categories, as you can see in the example in here in this figure. So here, for example, you have the product code, followed by the base rate and the staging categories. These staging categories, for example, means when it's 0, it means that it will be directly 0 at entry into force. This one means that it will be staged in 8 equal stage, so it will be 0 after 8 years. This one will be staged in 11 years, for example. And here the base rate can vary. It can be ad valorem and non-ad valorem. So how we are going to prepare the preferential tariffs? First, at the national tariff line level, we compute the staged preferential tariff from the entry into force until a certain period. In our case, we went until 2050. And then after that, we compute the AVE of non-ad valorem tariffs based on using the world tariff profile unit value methodologies. And we also compute the AVE of the tier 2. And the resulting AVEs are at the national tariff line level. Then we do an aggregation by simple average to get the AVE at the HS6 level. And then using GTAP 10 methodology, meaning that we do aggregation by 3-year bilateral import weighted average to get the AVE at the model sectoral level. And at the end, we get the aggregated staged preferential tariff for 2022 and 2050, assuming that the agreement will enter into force in 2022. Yes, so this one, the computation of the AVE of non-ad valorem tariffs are done following a methodology that is already widely used by other databases, such as the market access map database for tariffs. What I would like to develop further here is how we did to compute the AVE of tariff rate quota. But before that, let me share with you few examples of tariff rate quota. So here, as you can see, this is an example of reciprocal quota between this is an example of reciprocal quota applied by Mercosur on cheese on import from the EU. So here, what you can see is that you can see the 3 elements of the tariff rate quota, having the contingent, you have the inside quota rate, in green and the outside quota rate in red. So here you can see that Mercosur will phase out the tariff rate quota from the entry into force of the agreement. So starting from 3,000 metric tons until, and will gradually increase the volume until in 7 years, and starting from 2031, 30,000 metric tons of quota will be available for imports from the EU at the inside rate, so at zero tariff. Then above this quantity, when this quantity of 30,000 metric tons, is reached, the tariff that will apply is the outside quota rate. Here,
Antonia, you have 2 minutes left.
Okay. So based on this, we did the same, this procedure for all countries, computed the AVE. So to get the AVE of quota, we based our studies on Anderson and Leary, and got the AVE of quota, taking into account 3 possible equilibrium situation, as you can see here. And as a result, we get this estimation of the AVE of quota. All this process gave us this result of the AVE of preferential tariffs between for Brazil and EU, for example, and this one is for EU Brazil, and this is what we have used in our model for the assessment. So this is where, from here, we went to include this tariff, trade protection measures into our model, which is composed by 8 regions and 36 sectors. The regions are Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, the European Union without the UK, and China, the United States, and the rest of the world. And here are our sectors. So I would like to conclude that the procedure that we have implemented for our model and for our estimation will allow to get more accurate assessment of the potential impact of a trade liberalization, as forward-looking values of preferential tariffs are used instead of broad assumptions on tariff cuts. And also, our methodology will reduce the risk of overestimation of the effects of trade integration, especially on agricultural products, when liberalization takes the form of a tier. So on that, I thank you very much for your attention. The floor is open if you have any questions, and if you would like me to give additional explanation and clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonia. Well, now is the time to enter your questions and comments in the chat box. I will take questions as they appear. So there is Alex Tonini is asking, how did you compute what you have called quota premium or unit quota rent? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. To compute the unit quota, the quota premium, there is the quota premium will depend also on the administration method of the quota. In the case of our studies, we did not have to compute that premium, because in most of the case, especially in the case of Mercosur countries, most of quotas are below. So most of quotas falls into the regime 1. so below demand. And in the case of the EU, most of quotas are most of the tariff rate quota or over the quota. And even if we have taken the sort of interval to do a comparison for this comparison between the demand and the contingent, we still face that's the case where no specific contingent really fall at the quota. So our case were all either over or under or below the quota. So we did not have to do this estimation of the quota premium.
Thank you, Antonia. There is a question from Maria Latore. How do you calculate whether they are below or above the contingent of the quota?
Let me share my screen back. May I have the hand to share my screen again?
Yes, you could share your screen. Just click on the share icon.
All right. So in order to compute to get in which regime a tariff rate quota belongs, we made a comparison between the demand, the current, the most actual demand, and the contingent or the quota. So if the demand is below the quota, then we kept as the AVE the inside quota rate. If the demand was over the quota, then we kept. Actually, I think there is a mistake here. I'm sorry. This is not the IQTR plus in the regime 3. The AVE is not equal to the IQTR plus quota premium. It is equal to the outside quota rate. So it is equal to the OQTR. So there is a mistake here. I will correct in the slides later. I apologize for this typo. So in the regime 3, you will have then the outside quota. So here is an example. Here in this, I took the same example as the quota that we saw before. So on this product garlic, here are the AVE of inside quota tariff. There you have the AVE of outside quota tariff. Here you have the quota, the contingent in metric ton, and this is the demand. So the demand here, the demand that I used here is the latest data available without that did not suffer the flow that did not suffer from the pandemic. Then it means that it's an average demand between 2019, 2018, and 2017. And then with this comparison, here we have the conclusion that the regime that applies for in this tariff rate quota is the over quota tariff, and as a consequence, the AVE is equal to the outside quota rate. And if it was the opposite, if it was over, if it was a regime 1, then the AVE would be the inside the quota tariff rate. I hope I have answered Maria's question.
Yes, thank you, Antonia. There is another question from Kyung-Min Lee. And the question is, compared to other free trade agreements, what is the distinct feature of the EU-Mercosur free trade agreement? TRQs, or something else?
Compared to other trade agreements that I have studied so far, this agreement between EU-Mercosur is very interesting in the sense that first, the initial level of tariff is quite high in average, meaning that the trade between the two countries, the two blocks, the two regions is happening currently under the MFN regime. There are no trade agreements between the two countries so far, the two blocks so far. First, that's the first thing. The second thing is that the trade on agricultural products is regulated by tariff rate quotas. So tariff rate quotas is a key or key elements of the agreement, especially from the EU side. And the third element that is not part out of the scope of this study is that this agreement have several provisions on environment sustainabilities or on trade and sustainabilities, and also special provisions on intellectual properties, as well as specific treatment of special goods such as wine, such as cars, and so on.
Okay, thank you, Antonia. We have two more questions. One is from Maria, and he wants you to verify that the trade statistics you are using is from 2017-2019. Yes?
The trade statistics, yes, it depends. On the background that I described, I used the most recent trade that is available because as an illustration of what is the situation right now. So that is 2019. Then into the aggregation and the calculation for the AVEs, I used trade statistics in line with the GTAP 10 methodology. So the reference here is 2014. So in that case, I used 2012, 2013, and 2014, which I took the average and used it as the weight for the aggregation.
Thank you. And I have a question. You are doing a very careful job about TRQs between EU and Mercosur. What are you doing about TRQs for imports from other countries? For example, US beef exports to the European Union.
Thank you for the question. That is a very pertinent one. These TRQs are already taken into account in the database of the GTAP itself, the GTAP 10, because the trade protection measures used in GTAP 10 it comes from Market Access Map, and Market Access Map already provide the AVE of non-ad valorem duties and tariff rate quotas. So for the countries other than Mercosur and EU, existing preferences and existing tariff rate quotas already taken into account in the GTAP 10 database. Then, in my assessment, I also analyzed if there are existing quotas between the EU and Mercosur countries outside of this trade agreement. And from Mercosur side, there are none. However, from the EU side, there are a few, and for some of them, they are still going to be implemented. And for others, for example, for the quota on sugar for Brazil and Paraguay, there will be a reduction of the inside tariff rate on those, but those quota will remain under the WTO regime. So So just to summarize my answer, for the third countries, I did not do additional work because this has already been done by the data provider of GTAP 10. And for the additional tariff rate quota, for the tariff rate quota, existing tariff rate quota between the two blocks, I have considered them, but it is already taken. It is taken into account in for the 2021 estimation of the ABE, which is before the entry into force of the agreement.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Antonia. Okay, now let's. I want to introduce the second speaker, David Suarez from the Complutense University of Madrid. Will present his work about the impact assessment of the EU-Mercosur Association Agreement on the US economy. David, the floor is yours.
Hello, Marinos. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I had a problem with the microphone. So let me know if you can watch my screen.
I can see it. Thank you.
Okay, you can see it. Okay, thank you.
Great.
So thank you very much for listening to this, for attending this session and listening to my presentation. My name is David Suarez. I'm a PhD candidate from the Universidad Complutense in Madrid, as Marino said. The focus of my paper is the impact of the recently signed association agreement between the EU and the Mercosur region. Already Antonia spoke about it, and I maybe don't want to give so much detail as Antonia did on the features of the agreement, but yes, I would like to share with you my results on my simulations that I made. So, as a brief summary, I would say when it's a bit strange or maybe it's one of the main novelties of my analysis is that usually since I started studying CGE models, I've read many papers where analysts use the CGE models to study the impact on the signatory countries many times, at least the ones that I've had the opportunity to read. But I've not found so many focusing on maybe the impact that they could have on a third country. But in this case, I believe that the US, as it is a big trading partner both in Mercosur and the EU, I wanted to know maybe the impact that this big agreement would have on the US economy. I have to say that this is a preliminary approach. I'm still working on it. And also I want to ask both Marinos and Erwin that as I used the GTAP model, the version 7, the standard, if I say something that it's not true, please let me know. I think it's also important to know the impact that this agreement would have on the US economy, because even the US Department of Agriculture released a preliminary analysis of the impact that it could have on the US exports, agricultural exports. No, Well, so I will briefly explain the agreement, the main facts that I am interested on showing you in this analysis. Also, the U.S. trade relations with Mercosur and the EU, the methodology that I used, and macroeconomic results, focusing on sectoral results and bilateral exports. Well, this is not the first agreement that the EU has negotiated, but it is the largest up to now. The EU companies will benefit from privileged access to a market of over 260 million consumers. And moreover, the EU exporters will gain from progressive tariff cuts that over time will bring European companies yearly estimated savings of more than 4 billion euros. The other motivation I had also for studying the impact, it's because of the increasing importance of China in Mercosur region. After this agreement, the EU will be the first major trading partner to formalize an agreement with Mercosur, and this is which neither the US or China has. So EU will be granted preferential access in an area that also has currently been highly protected, as we will see. On the trade front, the EU is committed to, as also Antonia noted, is committed to liberalize 92. Well, both regions are committed to liberalize more than 90% of the imports, and the difference is that for Mercosur will take more time. It's committed in a maximum of 15 years, and in the case of the EU, in 10 years' time. This way, the Mercosur region will have free trade agreements with nearly at 25% of global GDP, whereas right now it has only 1.4%. Also, another aspect of the agreement, an important aspect, is the non-tariff measures that are going to be part of the agreement, and these are especially high in the Mercosur region. Actually, compared with other regions in the world, Mercosur still applies a significant number of non-automatic licenses. For instance, in the case of Brazil, more than 40% of Brazilian imports count with product-specific barriers. So this is a historic milestone, and this way EU will benefit from it. And also, for the first time, Mercosur will open its public contracts to foreign companies. And I will address this also in my simulations, which I will explain briefly. Okay, regarding the relations that the US has with both regions, here intra-regional trade is very important in both regions, mainly in the European Union, where more than 50% of the imports are intra-regional. So this the US has a special presence on service sectors in Europe, no? Also in agriculture, but Mercosur has a higher share here in agricultural sectors. Also in manufacturing sectors, traditionally the US had an important presence, but in the last decade, China has increased its share and is now leading the external import origin. And regarding the Mercosur, just a second. And regarding Mercosur, nearly a 50% of share of Mercosur imports are also intra-regional. This is also an image of how the high importance that the intra-regional trade has. Also, it's a closed market to external imports, high NTMs, as I said, and also high tariffs. And also, highest, excuse me. Also, I forgot to tell that the United States has a high share in agricultural imports, as I said, after the intra-regional, and this is mainly to cereal sectors that have a 27% share in the region. Okay. Well, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, I used the GTAP model version 7, the standard version. I remember when I had the opportunity to join the GTAP 101 course that we made experiments with less regions and less sectors, but this time I wanted to have a detailed to make a detailed analysis, and my model counts with 9 regions, the European Union, each of the Mercosur countries, and United States, China, and Canada. I also included China and Canada. China because I think also as it has a big importance in the trade with both regions. I wanted to include it, but also Canada because there's an ongoing. The negotiations are ongoing on a possible agreement between Mercosur and Canada, and as Canada is also it's important in the U.S. commerce, in U.S. trade. Then I wanted to include it also. But as I will explain in the last point of this slide, it's the impact is completely negligible because it's the scope is only tariffs in this case, and I will explain it at the end of the slide. Okay, and the factors of production are labor, land, natural resources, and capital. And sectors include agricultural sectors, manufacturing sectors, and also services, which is not a very common. It's not very common to include services in many studies, but I wanted to include them also because one of the milestones of this agreement is the opening of service sectors in Mercosur. NTMs are expected to descend at a very high level. So we will see now the current level of NTMs in these sectors in Mercosur, but I think it's important to quantify the possible impact. About the data, most data is from GTAP 10 database, but so I've used the standard version of the GTAP model. I've used the database GTAP 10, but in order to have the most recent, the most updated version of the tariffs within the regions, I updated those tariff data in the Run GTAP in Genpact software, the tariffs using data from International Trade Center, both trade map and market access map. Trade map for trade flows and market access map for those tariffs. About the non-tariff measures, which I also included in my simulations. As you may know, when you're using GTAP, you have to update using the alter tax function the the others from the software. So the original ones. So I updated them with this alter tax function, and I used two sources. For goods, I used the World Bank, and for services, I used two papers which show. I had to use them because we had issues when finding the non-tariff measures in services. And well, the simulations are, I've run 4 simulations: tariff reduction, as I said, NTM reduction, also public procurement, that it's also, as I said at the beginning, a very like a milestone from the agreement. This one was a bit more difficult because it's not that easy to establish a level of NTMs based on the official offers. So it was a bit more difficult, but we managed to include it. And also, as I said, the Canada-Mercosur tariff reduction, a very simple way, just reducing the tariffs down to 0. In both cases, it's a very optimistic scenario, but it was like an extra for our simulations. It's not the main agreement that we are studying. Here I wanted to show the importance of this agreement, because both tariffs and non-tariff measures are very high currently in Mercosur region. As you can see, for example, in wearing apparel, in many manufacturing sectors, the others, the tariffs are quite high, and the agreement is quite ambitious, as they would see reduced more than 90% those tariffs between regions. And also at the right side of the slide, I wanted to highlight in red color the level of NTMs corresponding to non-technical. I can't spend a lot of time here, but according to United Nations, we could divide the non-tariff measures in 2, in technical and non-technical. You for sure that already know each of them, but in the case of Mercosur, the level of non-technical measures, it's very, very high. In some cases, gets up to an 80%, and this is a very, very high rate, and this way, the expected impact between those regions, mostly it's quite high. However, I've run the simulations, and I've analyzed the impact that it would have on the US. Again, this time as I said before, I wanted to highlight also the NTMs in the case of service sectors. You can see that although in some sectors in the European Union are quite high, like banking, in the Mercosur regions are multiplied. You can see that maybe in Brazil, for example, banking is a very, very closed sector. It has a very, very high rate of NTM, of non-tariff measures, and therefore the expected increase in bilateral trade between European Union and Mercosur is high. And well, I want to go through the results briefly. As expected, the macro results are not that high, because we are talking about a third country, a non-signatory country. So I didn't expect the impact to be high, but even though it's negligible at this macroeconomic level, I want to highlight that except for aggregate exports, this agreement would impact negatively in this in the U.S. economy, in these variables. For instance, wages would fall 0.15%, that it's quite low, but well, I think that being all except for the aggregated exports at a negative level, I wanted to highlight these results. Also, I want to say that I will run dynamic model to to figure out some, also analyze other results like stock of capitals. Okay, thank you, Erwin. But well, the up to now the results are similar. And about welfare, well, also as expected, the welfare is positive. The agreement has a positive impact on the welfare in the signatory countries, and the negative in the USA and China. Also, again, it's very little, but I want to deepen a little bit in the sectoral, in bilateral exports. As I have 2 minutes, I will go over production, that it remains the same. But bilateral exports, I think it's interesting to highlight some results. It seems like part of the negative impact that the agreement would have on exports from some sectors would be softened or redirected to other regions of the agreement, and this way the aggregate result is not that high. But for example, in agricultural sectors, from my simulations, results show that the US would see its major impact on overlapping sectors that are expressed in this preliminary analysis I talked about from the US Department of Agriculture. So some sectors compete directly with Mercosur in exports to the European Union, and some of them, well, are cereals or bovine meat that have reductions of 7.5% or nearly a 16% reduction of these exports. Again, the US would increase its exports to other regions, and so the impact at an aggregate level is not that high. But it's interesting that it would be that the EU and the Mercosur would increase its exports, and this would influence the US exports. Part of these exports that I talked about of the agricultural sectors would be redistributed to the Mercosur region, and well, regarding manufacturing sectors, I don't have a lot of time, but here is where the US would find its largest impact in terms of bilateral trade with Mercosur, where the exports would fall by nearly 20% and $9 billion US dollars. I think this was also maybe expected because, as I said, the highest tariffs and the highest NTMs are in manufacturing sectors, and this way the EU would benefit from this, taking advantage on over the US. And well, regarding services, the US is already very strong in the EU, and it seems like, according to these results, it would even increase its exports to the EU. But the EU would also take advantage over the US on Mercosur, because as the US would reduce its exports in a very high rate in some cases, like insurance or business services, where I didn't include it in the slide, but in these cases, for example, the EU would increase its exports to the Mercosur by 35%. So, well,
David, let's stop here, and maybe we can come back if there are any questions.
Okay.
So there are two questions related to each other. Xiaomin Lee asks how you updated the 2014 GTAP data to include more recent statistics. And then Adwell Zebele wants you to clarify why you used alter tax. These two questions are related. So briefly, can you explain?
Okay, yes. Well, about the trade data, I think there's I made a mistake on the slide, or I didn't make me understand myself. But what I updated is by using the alter tax function on the run GTAP, I updated the tariffs. I mean, when I had to update the variable that it has that is related to tariffs in run GTAP, I included both tariffs and NTMs in those aves in the run GTAP. But what I did is update the tariffs only. I mean, I use the GTAP 10 database for my simulations. So the data used in the simulations corresponds to 2014, but using the volumes that I could find in TradeMap, and I managed to, with a lot of work, I have to say, I managed to recalculate the tariffs because I thought that it would be more interesting to include this. So that is, and about the alter tax, I didn't. Could you repeat the question? I'm not able to open the chat.
So let me see. You wanted to update the tariffs in the GTAP database, and you used the alter tax facility to do that, correct?
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Okay. Now, David Tarr has a question about services. And he's asking, did you consider FDI or only cross-border traded services?
Only cross-border till now. I'm working on this paper with Professor Latorre, and our aim is to include FDI, but I didn't up to now. Not. I think maybe in the future, but not. I haven't included.
All right. Now, Erika Bethman has a question. Can you please explain in more detail the methodology for computing and applying NTM reductions?
Yes.
Well, can you do that briefly, because we are running out of time?
Yes, of course. This was the hardest part of my analysis because I used to run GTAP. The thing is, the methodology I used is the one that I learned from the GTAP course. But when you are running simulations on run GTAP and you want to include NTMs, you have to update the variable of, it's called TMS, that it's the one related to tariffs. So you have to update that variable by using this function that already talked about, the alter tax. The main difficulty that I had, and maybe you can personally contact me if you want to, but I had to build an Excel file where I could automatically calculate those reductions, like taking into account all the tariffs and the updates, and automatically generate those codes. It was very difficult, but well, briefly and summarizing, I used alter tax, and it took me quite a while to get to those levels, no? Because it's the software I recently learned how to use around GTAP. So thank you, Marinos, thank you, Erwin.
Thank you. No, I have a question myself.
Okay.
The NTM reductions you are doing are bilateral between EU and Mercosur. Do you think there's any reason to suppose that maybe NTMs for imports from other countries will decline too?
Up to now I didn't have time to to search for it. So you're asking me if maybe China or other regions would reduce its exports to Mercosur or European Union? Is this
No,
what
when
you're...
Mercosur reforms its NTM policies, they
Yes.
affect also imports from other countries.
Well, I mean, as the European Union is the first one to challenge Mercosur on NTMs, for example, or on reducing its tariffs, I think that the European Union is opening the path for future relations with other countries. And in the case of NTMs, I believe that as the European Union is not imposing Mercosur to adopt its own standards, but to adopt international ones, I think that many regions and countries would benefit from this because, like, European Union is challenging Mercosur. I don't know if I make if I explain myself, but
that's good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I mean, if there are more questions, people can contact you via email, etc. So now we'll move to the last presentation, and that will be Gabriela Ortiz Valverde from the National University of Costa Rica, and she will present her work of a computable general equilibrium assessment of the short and the long run impact on Brazil of this free trade agreement. Gabriela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marinos. So, good morning, everyone. I would like to present some preliminary results regarding the potential impact of the EU-Mercosur Free Trade Agreement on Brazil. This paper corresponds to a joint work with Carlos Javier González and Maria La Torre. In this paper, we analyze the potential impact of the EU-Mercosur Free Trade Agreement on Brazil, and using the static and the recursive dynamic model of the Global Trade Analysis Project. This presentation is divided into four main sections. In the first one, I would like to present some important aspects about the EU-Mercosur Free Trade Agreement. Then I will talk about the model, the data, and some aspects about the simulations that we use in our analysis. And in the third section, I'm going to present the main results and then some conclusion remarks. Okay, so regarding the EU-Mercosur Free Trade Agreement, we can highlight some aspects of this agreement. One of the main characteristics of this free trade agreement is that Mercosur will liberalize near to 91% of its imports coming from the European Union, and over a period of 15 years, while the EU will liberalize 92% of its imports coming from Mercosur over a period of up to 10 years. Another aspect is that the European Union will liberalize 82% of agricultural imports, while the rest of products in that sector will face a partial liberalization. So this liberalization on agricultural sector will imply opportunities for Mercosur farmers to trade raw materials and such as soybeans to the European market. On the other hand, Mercosur will liberalize sectors of interest to the European market. For example, wine, olive oil, frozen potatoes, and chocolate, among other important sectors. So, well, let's now turn to the model, data, and some specifications about the simulations that we use in our analysis. To analyze the impact of the EU-Mercosur Free Trade Agreement on Brazil, we use the static and the recursive dynamic CGE model from the Global Trade Analysis Project. And the use of both the static and the recursive dynamic setting of the GTAP model will allow us to estimate the effects of this free trade agreement in the short and the long run. Our model includes 36 sectors. 26 of them are goods sectors and 10 of them services sectors. 9 regions. In these 9 regions, we include the European Union, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, the United States, Canada, China, and the rest of the world. And we also consider 4 factors: land, labor, capital, and natural resources. This regional and sectoral aggregation is based on the 65 sectors and 121 countries from the GTAP 10 database. Regarding to estimate the impact in the long run of this agreement in Brazil, we simulate each scenario against a baseline scenario in which the free trade agreement is not enforced. The baseline projection is obtained by simulating the model forward from the 2014 base year of the data set to 2038. It includes updates in GDP, GDP per capita, population, and labor force, and these updates correspond to the second path of the socioeconomic development derived from the shared socioeconomic pathway database developed by the International Institute for Applied System Analysis. As well as in the static model, we update the values of tariffs from the GTAP database. We update these values considering the latest data available for the 2019 from the ITT MacMap. Regarding non-tariff measures, for the goods sectors, we have used the information estimated by the World Bank, and for the services measures, estimated by the OECD researchers and Benz and Jacks 2020 and Fontanier et al. 2016. Regarding public procurement, we take into account a fall in the non-tariff measure of 4%, and that was estimated as negotiated in the agreement. Okay, turning our attention now to the main results. We find that with the static model under the total scenario, both regions, the European Union and Brazil, will benefit from the free trade agreement. We can see that the European Union will face an increase by 0.05%, while Brazil will face an increase of 0.34% in GDP by 2038. And that means that 16 years after the free trade agreement comes into force. The increase in GDP in both regions will be explained by the increase in trade flows. However, the effects of the free trade agreement are clearly higher in Brazil than in the European Union. And regarding private expenditure, which is a measure of welfare, it has a positive impact on both sides. In addition, we can see that wages and capital remunerations also will face a positive impact. And if we turn to the analysis of the sectoral outcomes, in terms of sectoral results, we can highlight the effect of the free trade agreement between the EU and Mercosur on the bovine and ruminant meat, let me see where is it. Okay, here. Bovine and other ruminant meat, live animals, meat and animal products. Yes, animal products and vegetable oils and fats, which could face an increase in production in Brazil by around 4.67%, for 7.95%, and 5.22%, respectively. And that increase in total production in these sectors could be explained by the increase in exports by 28%, 20% and 24%, respectively. As we can see, the increase of these export flows could be oriented to the European market. We can see that we can see, for example, in this column, that the EU imports could increase in these sectors in which the exports from Brazil are increased to. With respect to the impact of the free trade agreement on the sector of production in the European Union, we can see that this agreement could benefit production in textile sectors, which could face an increase of 2.16%. And these sectors also could face a positive impact in terms of exports, as we can see here, with an increase of 4.69%. And and on the other hand, we can see that Brazil increased the imports in this product in specific. So okay. Let me just, yeah. Okay, now I would like to look at some results under the recursive dynamic model. At the macroeconomic level, we also find that Brazil will receive greater benefits from the free trade agreement and the European Union. We can see the Brazil will face an increase of GDP by 1.28%, while the European Union just in 0.04%. Under the recursive dynamic model, Brazil will also face an increase in terms of private consumption, aggregate imports and exports, and factor remuneration. We also find that total production in sectors such as live animals, meat and animal products, and vegetables, vegetable oils and fats, also will face an increase, such as the static model. But with respect to the European Union, we find that it will face a slight reduction in private consumption, reflecting a fall in the welfare of the population. And this reduction in private consumption is in line with the fall in factor remunerations and the slight increase in GDP. And if we see the results for the sectoral outcomes, we find that European just a few minutes, because I have a little kitty and he's in my desk. Okay. Well, regarding the results obtained from the dynamic model to the European Union, we find that textiles will face a reduction. So we find some differences between the results, especially for the European Union, with the recursive dynamic model with respect to the static model. So regarding the results obtained from the dynamic model, we still have work to do, especially in the analysis of the sectoral results, in which we find some difference with respect to the results produced by the static model. And regarding the macroeconomic results, we also need to review the results in this variable that is private expenditure in the case of the European Union. So these are the preliminary results from the recursive dynamic model, and we hope to extend the analysis and present more results just run the simulations of tariff, NTMs, and public procurement separately, and to understand why the private expenditure falls in this case in the recursive dynamic model. Well, as concluding remarks, we highlight that for Mercosur, the agreement great opportunity to achieve international and European standards in the trade of goods and services, besides the positive impact in terms of GDP and sectoral production. For the European Union, also, the free trade agreement does not provide a significant benefit as it does for Mercosur members, but this agreement consolidates the European Union as the largest promoter of free trade in the world. And with respect to Brazil, in Brazil, sectors such as like animals, meat and animal products, and vegetable oils and fats will be benefit from the trade agreement. And just to highlight, well, this result that results from the recursive dynamic are preliminary, and we are surprised by the fall in the private consumption and factor remuneration. So we find that these results for the EU are not in line with the ones obtained with the static model. So we need to work more in these simulations in the recursive dynamic model. So, well, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Gabriela. We have a few questions. David Tarr has two questions. One is about the food and agricultural products which are excluded from the agreement, especially for the European Union. And the second question is about what do you use for estimates of non-tariff measures in government procurement?
Okay, what do you use for estimate of non-tariff measures in government procurement? Let me see. I think I didn't have the source, the specific source in hand, but Maria.
Yes.
Yes.
I may jump in if you want.
Yes,
yes,
please.
Yes.
Okay, so for the public procurement, we do not use other barriers. What we assume is that the NTNs may still be further reduced due to the agreement, because really for the EU will be the only region that has preferential access to Mercosur countries. So we take this as an opportunity for them to compete with preferential advantage or compared to other regions. So the NTMs that are estimated by the different sources that were mentioned, either from the World Bank or from Benz and Jacks from the OECD, what we take are further liberalization, apart from the simulations that are specifically focused on NTMs. Public procurement adds an additional reduction. That's what we do here. And regarding which food and agricultural products are excluded, well, in most of them, what happens with the agreement is that there are new, as Antonia explained at the beginning, there are new quotas for many agricultural products. In some cases, they expand the existing quotas.
Oh, thank you.
So it really depends on the sector. There are different stories about them, but in general, there are a higher contingent for quotas that allows a larger part of trade to come in without any duty. But if you go beyond the quota, then MFN tariffs apply. So you have a change in the current regime. It's more open in agricultural products, but you have, in most of the agricultural sectors, you still have quotas. I don't know if that replies to your question. You have a comment there, David? I was looking at it.
Yes.
I believe you have a CRTS model. Preferential agreements can reduce welfare due to trade diversion, the elasticity of substitution between imports from different regions, the most important parameter, as the Yates explained with different values for this parameter. Thank you very much, David. As Gabriela explained, we really haven't had much time yet to look carefully at the results. We were a bit puzzled with some negative impacts for the EU. We haven't seen that in other studies. So thank you. I'll take that into account and we'll have a closer look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I have a question about some time ago, there was a lot of interest in the environmental impacts of this agreement, especially in Brazil. From the analysis you have done, do you get any sense, do you get any indications about this issue?
Okay.
Shall I, Gabriela, or do you want to go for that?
Well, if we review some results related with, can you repeat the question, please?
Well, I don't follow the developments very well here, but a few months ago, there was discussion about the environmental impacts of the agreement on the environment in Brazil. Now, you don't look at this closely, but from what you have done, do you see, for example, a huge expansion in agricultural production in Brazil? You know, can you make any guesses?
Well, we didn't cover the analysis of the impact of the free trade agreement in the in this aspect. I don't know if Maria and Carlos Javier talk about this.
I can jump in. Yeah, so we really didn't in these simulations. We do not simulate any impact on CO2, and so we don't look at that. What I can say from what we've done in a different paper with Michi Jonefawa and Sorjana Alexeyuk, and we are presenting that tomorrow in a session on Mercosur. So what we are careful there about the impact on CO2, and what we find is that the agreement it results in an increase in CO2, but the increase is smaller than the GDP across all regions. So In other words, we are turning to cleaner techniques to produce. Also, in that paper, the impact is more positive for the EU because we include FDI and other aspects and merits competition. But nicely, because I think, as you say, there is a lot of interest in that respect, what we find is that GDP outcomes are larger than the CO2 emissions. So this turns the world into cleaner technologies, so to put it. For all the countries involved in the agreement, and also for the world as a whole, because we cover all the calculations for the world economy also. So that's nice.
Yeah, thank you, Maria.
There is a comment of David.
Yeah, David has a comment about his work about Chile.
Yes, my paper in Chile with Harrison and Rutherford in World Bank Economic Reviews shows welfare reduction from trade diversion depending on the agreement. There is welfare loss from many of the agreements we consider. Okay, I will take a look of that paper. Thank you very much.
Yes, we will have a look. I think it's interesting in this respect to highlight that when you include monopolistic competition, which I think is a real world feature for many sectors, and when you include the FDI barriers, and I think we've been quite conservative using, David, we use your data set that you calculated for the World Bank on FDI barriers. Once you include more aspects of the agreement, then the impact for Europe it's going up. It's going up for many regions, right? So it's not only for Europe, but it turns out to be more positive. So as I said, we still have to have a look at these recursive dynamic results. I don't know if there are any more questions, or
I don't see more questions. We have a couple of minutes before we go to the next to the discussant. Okay, Lee Humphreys.
Well,
There's a question about land use changes. Your results for cattle and vegetable oils and fats suggest there might be some interesting changes in land use.
No.
That's what I was alluding to. Even though you don't, go deep into environmental impacts,
No.
you may get some suggestions.
Okay. Yes, perfect.
yeah, that's yes, something we should consider. Thank you for the comment, Lee.
Thank you for the comment. I will consider that.
Well, so I want to thank Antonia, David, Gabriela, and Maria for presenting. In this session, we have a discussant. It's Cicero Zanetti de Lima from the São Paulo School of Economics, Getulio Vargas Foundation. I don't see any more questions coming up in the chat box. Erwin, should we?
yes, please, let's go ahead.
Okay, so Cicero, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me, Marinos? Irving?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. Good morning for everyone. Or good afternoon, good evening. I don't know where you are now, but so I'd like to say thank you for Marinos for this invitation. Actually, I'm replacing Professor Erli Teixeira. That Professor Erli, in this time, especially this time of that we are living, Professor Lee is in one of his coffee farmers in the middle of nowhere here in Minas Gerais state, enjoying his grandchild. So this is why I'm replacing him. And I have just 4 slides to share. May I share here?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, can you see my slides here?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So today we had these 3 presentations. I think that I'd like to congratulate Antonia, David, and Gabriela, and also Professor Latorre. I think that you guys are well oriented and supported by Professor Latorre in these simulations and also these projections with the EU and Mercosur Agreement. And I think in some cases, just let me look here, where is it? Okay. In some cases, we have in this, when we try to run these projections, these simulations, we have some tricky results. And also Marinos was asking about these environmental issues and also these land use issues. I think that, for example, especially for the case for Brazil, we saw in Gabriela's presentation a huge increase in imports of OMT sectors, the meat sector, especially for cattle. But in case Brazil is not an importer of these commodities, it's also exporter. So I think that in some cases we should dig more the results and show, for example, the nominal change, because we are departing for a lower base, and also the percentage change is a huge number. But when we are starting in a small number, these kind of results could be tricky. But also, I think that these 3 articles, they are complementary each other. Of course, we have some specific results for Brazil in one paper, and also some leakage or some indirect effects for United States and Canada. And I think that on the method side, we are using here, we saw here the guys, they are using the static version of the GTAP. That I have some comments to do on that, and also the dynamic GTAP, both using the GTAP V10, the database V10. So, and I think that for the methodological part, I don't have comments. So I think that that's it. This is the way to go to apply, to correct the tariffs using the alter text, try to bring all the information that we have from the non-tariff measures, and also the tariffs on service. Because when you bring the service to the simulation, the projections, the results change a lot. We do like a big mess in the projections and also the simulation, because this is crucial. Since around 60% of GDP in some regions or some countries that are involved in the agreement are based on services. So, and here at FGV, we are supporting I started 3 or 4 months ago in a project that we are supporting the Minister of International Affairs in some kinds of these negotiations. And also these guys, the policymakers, they are bringing to us some demands. So, okay, if you reduce the tariffs on service or these non-tariff measures, and these results change a lot when you bring more information or extract these sectors from the simulation. Okay, and also this is the comments that I have. For example, for the static GTAP, so this is more like a kind of provocation for the discussion. So to show the GDP that in a static version of GTAP and in these simulations that we are running is the best metric. Could we change for the private consumption? Could be a better measure, and also to explain when we prepare the project to deliver to these guys when they are in the table of negotiation, to explain that, oh, okay, the private consumption is increasing or decreasing. So which is the best metric? And also, I think that it's a good exercise to do is to work with the universe of tariffs, because this is how these guys they they put the tariffs on negotiation on the table. So also the results may change when we add or extract these sensible sectors. And also, we notice here in some cases, when we are not considering Brazil as a region in a whole region, for example, Mercosur, as just one country doing an agreement with Canada, for example, we notice a positive return on land, especially in the static model. It's a huge response on land. So this is increasing the pressure of natural resources, but also we should investigate this more. So we are expecting, for example, in an agreement with Canada or other country or richer country, developed country, we are expecting an increased pressure of natural resource as cropland. This is we could translate this for deforestation and pressure on deforestation, and also in water, irrigation, and also biodiversity. So I think that these are some questions that Marino asked, and we should bring to the analysis. And also just a comment that here on our side in Brazil, Brazil is trying to increase the international trade basis with new agreements with Indonesia, Vietnam, Canada, and some countries in Central America, Dominican Republic, and also Costa Rica. But this is a problematic region because the interaction of this region with the United States. But in the end of the day, I think that Brazil could benefit from both of these worlds. Of course, increase the international trade basis and also keep the trade with China, bring more agreements with, and also projects with China, but also keep the trade with United States, bringing some knowledge, management improvements, technological transfer with these intra firms and intra companies, that they exchange a lot of this kind of innovation, and also in the end of the day, you have a higher productivity for capital, labor, and in our country. But also, I think that these environmental issues, as I mentioned, especially with the European Union, we should bring to the analysis. For example, we are expecting in the next years a kind of carbon border adjustment, bringing from the EU or China, maybe China in Brazil, and also these new adjustments could change all the results that we are simulating these kind of agreements. And also in our side here is also this political stability in Brazil, and also the ideological issues is also it's a problem. So at some point we are doing a lot of trade with China, but we hate China, not me, but our politicals and also our president. And also the speed of COVID vaccination, and also this we have results, we have impacts for the economic recovery. I think that all these aspects will impact the speed of these agreements, and also how the agreement with Mercosur and European Union will put in place in the next a couple of years in the middle run and also in the long run. So yeah, on my side, that's it. So I put these topics on discussion. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much, Cicero. Well, Erwin, we have a few more minutes.
Yes, if there are more questions, or if you want to have more discussions, we can have it. Otherwise, we can end the session early.
Marinos, if I may?
Please.
Thank you. So I want to thank Cicero for his comments. Thank you very much. I just wanted to reflect on one of the things he mentioned, because he says Brazil is studying new trade agreements, right, with Vietnam and a few others, right? I just thought that they are always going to be smaller partners, right? I think an agreement with the EU is always special because the size of many things becomes so large that really you can expect much broader impacts for the signatories, right? And I think that makes a huge difference when you compare it with other possible agreements. And that is why I think this agreement is also attracting so much attention, because the partners are very big. Brazil is very big, the EU is very big also. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on something Maria said, if I may. David Tarr.
Yes, please.
So I think Maria's point is a really good one about the impact of an agreement with a large region. And that's essentially what our results in Chile showed. We looked at Chile, which I probably led the world in this effort to have agreements with essentially anyone who wanted to sign. And many of these agreements taken individually, we found would be welfare reducing for Chile. But if they had an agreement with the United States, combined with some of these agreements with smaller countries, then they would not, the marginal impact of the agreement with the smaller countries would be welfare increasing rather than decreasing, because the trade diversion effects would be minimized due to competition from the United States and Chile. So I think Maria's point with respect to the EU applies here as well. So if you had an agreement with a small country that Mercosur did, it might be welfare reducing for Mercosur, but with the competition from the European Union, the trade diversion impacts of an agreement with a small country are minimized, and they tend to be welfare increasing once you start with an agreement with the European Union.
If I may, Marinos, may I very shortly follow up from David's comment? Just asking him, if I may, whether that is those results he was mentioning are the ones that you were citing from this paper you cited above in the chat. Did you analyze that there?
Yeah, it's a paper in the World Bank Economic Review, 2002.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'll have a look. Thank you very much, David.
May I follow up with a comment here? Because I saw there was a comment from Fernando in the chat box about the reduction of NTMs on third countries. I think that when we are in a situation where there is an agreement that has been negotiated, it's not applied yet, but we know what it contains. We know the contents of the agreement. And I think at this stage, it's of course very important to read the agreement to the letter, because we can actually figure out what type of non-tariff barriers or non-tariff measures have been included. And we're going to have to try to assess the extent to which this means trade cost reductions. Now, that's a problem in itself, just to have assessments of what the actual non-tariff barriers are. But in addition to that, when we now have the agreement, we can try to make an educated guess how much will this mean in terms of trade cost reductions. And in addition, we should be in a position to see whether this non-tariff barrier trade cost reduction, if there is such in the agreement, whether they apply bilaterally or also if third countries can free ride on what the European Union and the Mercosur countries have agreed. It's just a point that I think it's important to look at the agreement in detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars.
If I may, very shortly, following Lars' comment, I wanted to ask him, probably he shares this view that if Mercosur turns to international standards, as we were saying earlier, right, that should benefit the others. I think that is what Lars was referring to with his last sentence, but just to be sure whether he shares that view, if I may.
No, I was actually meaning whether there is something explicit in the agreement that would indicate that third countries may benefit from reduction in non-tariff barriers. That's what I'm referring to.
I see. Well, we have had a look at the texts of the agreement, and really the reductions in NTMs are more difficult because, as you say, it's hard to translate them. But for the tariff reduction, it's really the codes. We went through all the HS8 level digit codes and looked for the different regimes across the sectors and translated that into trade-weighted data. That has taken us a lot of time. But regarding the NTMs, I think, as you said, I think it's a harder judgment, right? Well, the impact of the text, how you interpret it or how it translates to a quantitative measure of reduction in barriers, that's really hard, right?
No, it is very difficult. I mean, no, the tariffs are straightforward. It's time-consuming and labor-intensive, but at least it's concrete. You can see what's there and you can try to deal with it. The non-tariff barriers are much, much worse, as I said, because you need to try to interpret what does this mean in terms of trade cost reductions. And even if you try to figure out that this means, I don't know, a 10% decrease in trade cost reductions, from which level? I mean, you need to have the underlying barrier so you can actually reduce that barrier. And that is the second problem. But I think there are econometric estimates on non-tariff barriers between many trading partners. I mean, there are various sources to this. So I think that's less of a problem, but it's the interpretation of what it means that what we actually have achieved. And I think that the European Union most likely achieves less in terms of non-tariff barrier reductions than what we would like to think. But it's clear that in many agreements, specifically in, I would say, some ex-ante simulations that I've seen, there are assumptions on NTB reductions in both goods and services that are, well, let me put it mildly, it's somewhat exaggerated, if I put it that way. Thank you.
Yeah, I see your point. I think here we have been quite conservative in reductions of NTMs. It would be possible to get stronger impact by cutting the NTMs that we have to a larger extent that we've done. I think David went a little bit through that, even though he didn't have time to develop, but we have differentiated between technical measures, because the non-technical ones, the World Bank separates them. So we were able to know from each NTM which part refers to non-technical measures and which part refers to SPS and TBTs. And we find SPS and TBTs are harder to reduce because sometimes they are more delicate. I think there may be a scope, and particularly with respect to Mercosur countries, right? But looking at the EU side, it's more difficult. But for the technical measures, particularly Mercosur, and David showed they were very big in the overall NTMs measures, the share of technical ones, the automatic licenses, all that stuff that makes trading with Mercosur countries quite difficult for outsiders, because you don't know exactly how long it will take you to get the product in, and it's harder than in other parts of the world. We thought this agreement could cut those barriers to a large extent. So what we do is a bit asymmetric. NTMs cuts are smaller in the EU side and larger in the Mercosur countries, which we believe it could make sense. and we rely on the particular share of what is SPS and TBTs and what is the rest, because again, I think that is different how maybe there's more scope, we believe, but with the measures that are not related to SPS and TBTs. That was a bit our approach. We couldn't explain it here, but I think we tried to be careful about what was behind the NTMs.
Okay, no, I mean, ideally, you would want to say that the reduction in this particular non-tariff barrier can be found per page 342. You know, that's the type of so you can actually link what you're doing to the trade cost reduction. Ideally, I'm saying. I know it's very difficult, but if we have the text of the agreement, we're going to try to assess this. I mean, this is the direction I think we should be going at.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I could not turn my camera. It's not working, so sorry about that.
Well, I think this has been a very nice session. I want to thank the presenters, Antonia, David, Gabriela, Cicero, the discussion. I want to thank all the attendees, very nice comments. So I think we are probably finished with this session. There is another similar session tomorrow morning, is session number 15. It looks again at the EU-Mercosur trade agreement from different angles. Erwin, I pass it to you.
Okay, I think we'll end the session. But don't forget, there's a plenary session coming up in about 33 minutes time. So we hope to see you all there in the plenary.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.